2, I guess it was, maybe the 4 year. I was in New York for 4 years, and I had been out on Long Island, briefly visiting and so on. But when you were actually recruited, you said your family moved there, but what was the procedure by which you got involved? I mean, were you kidnapped?
Well, you could call it that. They would just take you. They have a technology which creates a wormhole. And a wormhole is different than a vortex. A vortex is a passage, if you will, from one reality to another reality. A wormhole is when they open a shortcut, an energetic shortcut from point A to point B within the same reality. So they could pinpoint energetically through technology that was given to them from alien civilizations. They could pinpoint a location even in someone's bedroom, put that into the equipment, a wormhole opens up, and they literally walk right into your room, and they can take you. They also have the ability to create a dampening field in the home so that people who are in there don't realize what's going on. They either sleeping or they just ignore that particular area and they don't know why. But they have a way of making your disappearance unknown to the people until you come back. There were times, though, when someone would say to me, hey, I went in your room and you weren't there. And it was like middle of the night. Where were you? Did you go to the bathroom? Did you go downstairs? And I'd say, I couldn't even answer that question. And very often I would wake up and I would, my bedroom would be in disarray, like someone had really trashed it. So there was a lot of evidence much of the time when I was taken, if you will. Kidnapping, I guess you could call it that, but I guess from the Montauk perspective, they don't call it kidnapping. They were just taking me for work.
Okay. And were your parents involved in this work?
My parents were not involved in work, at least on the surface. But, things happened to me over the years, even before Montauk, which were odd that I confronted them. My father, obviously, with the Russian connections and military connections, was an enigma and still is to this day. My mother used to bring me after school, before Montauk Project, every week, afternoon, to this Victorian mansion where I would be brutally examined. I was the only so-called patient in this Victorian building. They would put me out onto the floor. I was young, 5, 6, 7 years old. They would tell me to build something with blocks. And every time I would build a cemetery. Now, most kids would build a building or something like that. I used to build tombstones. And I found out years later that was part of cemetery programming, which is part of mind control. Years later, I confronted my mother with this. And, of course, she denied it. And then finally she said, well, it wasn't every Friday. She kind of confirmed. Yeah.
Oh,
and I found out that this was Dr. Green, a.k.a. Dr. Mengele.
Yes.
Brutal, but I can say brutal, excruciating examinations on me where I just wanted to die when they examined me. My mother also brought me to a dentist that performed oral surgeries on me and fillings without anesthesia and would not allow my mother in the room. Years later, just a couple of years ago, I had all these fillings extracted, all the mercury taken out of my mouth. And the dentist said to me, who did this to you? This is totally unnecessary work. Who did this to you? So again, I confronted my mother, and again, she denied it. But I said, hey, I have proof in my mouth that this happened, so you can't deny this. But, there's just a certain line you can't go across with them, and so I just stopped pursuing it.
Well, that's really bizarre. So in some ways, it sounds like you were put through some rituals that they put Illuminati children through.
Yes.
So were your parents technically, is your bloodline the Illuminati bloodline?
Well, no, my mother is part half Romanian, half Austrian, and my grandmother was a gypsy, so that's no Illuminati there. And my father's family were communists in the Soviet Union.
Well, that doesn't mean they're not Illuminati bloodline.
If they were, an enigma to me because I certainly don't have any connections. What I do know, what I did find out from a researcher in New York City years ago, was that my family name, Sverdlov, means in Swedish, the sword and the leaf. It's actually not a Russian name at all. And he traced my family's ancestry back to the 800s in a town in Sweden on the Norwegian border. And apparently, they were part of a group called the Rus, which were a Viking group, which invaded what we now know as Russia and gave Russia its name. From Rus came Russia, or Russia. And they lived in a city in Russia called Novgorod, which is only descendants of Viking families that lived there. So in effect, I found out that my family isn't really Russian at all, but came from Swedish Vikings.
Okay. Well, that follows along the lines of what are part of the Illuminati bloodlines. And the gypsy element is something that they have tracked, much like they do the Native Americans, because that combination, certain combination will make you quite psychic and aware on certain levels. So at any rate, you got involved in this program and you're sort of being prepared on some level. There's also an element of them using the orgone energy.
Yes.
Open the portals.
What they had was a technology where it was a square room, and in each corner of the room were tube-like devices which were kind of, I would call them energy absorbers or amplifiers. And they would have the child on a slab or a table in the middle of this room, restrained down, and they would perform all kinds of torture to create extreme fear. And when they received the height of the fear, and the child was at the height of the fear, these four-corner tube-like systems would activate and literally absorb that energy and store it somehow, and then were able to amplify that and project that out through ELF and microwave transmissions to the general public as a form of mind control. Because they knew from Nazi experiments that when someone is in extreme fear or trauma, it opens up the mind to allow programming to enter. And that's why today we see all of this fear mongering and all of these traumatizing events happening in the world, and the media amplifying them constantly to create a state of fear in the public, so that mind control waves will constantly take hold from satellite transmissions.
Okay. Well, that's one use of it, but my understanding of the use of orgone is also to open those wormholes and to time travel, to make time travel possible. Did you experience any of that?
That, quite honestly, I'm going to have to say that's one part of it that is just a phase. They had other equipment that used electromagnetic energies and even astral energies in order to accomplish time travel and portals and things like this. The orgone energy, which is from Reich experiments, that was used mostly in sexual magic ritual. And what they used that for was to amplify programming and mind control patterns that they could then imprint on the public. The actual technology for wormholes, vortices, and time travel and other things was more technological than just orgone energy.
Okay. So can you describe what you were experiencing in terms of the people that you met there?
Well, I was young, as you know. I was only in my teens at the time. And there were many, many different people that came in. A lot of the children were anywhere from infants to teenagers. There were adults. I would say I saw people as old as in their 30s that were involved in these experiments. Much of the people were considered to be expendable. In other words,